Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to constantly walk on eggshells around your own thoughts? We spend so much of our lives learning how to move through the world quietly, carefully, and gracefully. We learn how to read a room the moment we step into it. We adjust our tone, filter our feelings, soften our words, and tuck away any part of ourselves that might seem too loud, too needy, or too inconvenient for others. We put an incredible amount of energy into making sure everyone around us feels comfortable, understood, and at peace. But in the middle of all that careful managing, we so easily forget to check in on the climate we have created inside our own minds. You might be sitting on your couch after a long, demanding day. The house is quiet, the chores are done, and on the surface, everything is fine. Or maybe you are standing in your kitchen in the soft light of early morning, waiting for the tea to brew. Externally, there is no emergency. There is no immediate threat, no one demanding anything from you in that exact second. And yet, beneath your chest, there is this persistent, invisible tension that simply refuses to settle. It feels like a subtle hum of restlessness. It is the quiet feeling that if you dare to slow down, if you really sit still and take a deep, unfiltered breath, an entire avalanche of self-doubt, hidden grief, or unfinished emotional business will catch up to you. So you keep moving. You reach for a small distraction. You find another item to add to your list, or you replay old memories. Anything to keep your mind occupied. Because deep down, resting feels unsafe. Being alone with your own heart feels like standing in a storm without an umbrella. Without even realizing it, most of us spent years building heavy armor to protect ourselves from the outside world. We built it to survive criticism, to shield ourselves from rejection, and to avoid the stinging pain of feeling like we weren't enough. But over time, a quiet tragedy occurred. The defense system we constructed to guard against external harm slowly turned inward. We became hyper-vigilant monitors of our own reactions. We became harsh, uncompromising judges of our own mistakes and constant, relentless critics of our most vulnerable feelings. If we feel tired, we scold ourselves for being lazy. If we feel anxious, we berate ourselves for being weak. If we feel sad without an obvious reason, we tell ourselves to just get over it. We began treating our own inner world not as a home to be nurtured, but as a problem to be solved, or a threat to be managed. If you have ever felt like your own mind is a place you constantly need to run away from, please know how deeply human that is. You are not broken for feeling this way. You are simply carrying a weight you were never meant to hold alone, using survival strategies that have long outlived their purpose. It takes an enormous amount of energy to treat your own self as an adversary, and it is entirely natural that you are feeling tired. Emotional safety doesn't begin when the world around you suddenly becomes gentle, quiet, or predictable. It begins when you decide to stop being at war with what is happening inside your own chest, It starts when you look at your own restlessness, your own anxiety, and your own weary thoughts, and instead of pushing them away, you offer them a chair to sit down. So before we move any further into this reflection together today, let's take a moment to change the atmosphere inside. Right where you are, drop your shoulders away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. Take a slow, gentle breath, expanding your chest, and let the air out with a long, soft exhale. Give yourself permission to pause. Leave a simple, quiet statement in the comments below right now. I am learning to feel at home within myself. Let those words be a gentle promise to your heart, and let them serve as your anchor for everything we are about to explore together. What does it actually mean to live without emotional safety inside your own skin? We often imagine that a lack of safety must look like a sudden, dramatic breakdown, a severe emotional crisis, or a moment where everything completely falls apart. But most of the time, the absence of inner safety is far more quiet, subtle, and ordinary. It doesn't always announce itself with loud alarms. Instead, it lives in the small, unexamined corners of your daily routine. It is a persistent background feeling that you are constantly on trial, and that the judge evaluating you is your own mind. It looks like finishing a casual conversation with a neighbor or a colleague, and immediately stepping away into a cloud of second-guessing. You replay every single sentence you said over and over in your head for the next 3 hours. You analyze the tone of your voice, the way you stood, and the way you laughed. You search endlessly for any sign that you sounded awkward, said the wrong thing, or made a fool of yourself. There is no peace after connection, only a tense, exhausting audit of your performance. It looks like reaching for your phone the very second a quiet pause appears in your day. You are standing at a red light, walking through a room, or waiting for water to boil. And before you even realize what you are doing, your fingers are scrolling. It isn't because you have an urgent message to read or someone vital to contact. It is because sitting completely still with your own unfiltered thoughts, even for 30 seconds, feels deeply unnerving. Silence feels less like a sanctuary and more like an empty room where your insecurities are waiting to speak to you. When you lack safety within yourself, every single mistake, no matter how tiny or meaningless, becomes a heavy verdict on your character rather than just a normal human event. If you spill a glass of water on the floor, your immediate inner reaction isn't to gently clean it up. It's a sudden, sharp surge of anger at yourself. If you drop an item, stumble over a phrase while speaking, or miss a turn while driving, a wave of heat and self-blame instantly floods your chest. You treat yourself like an harsh, unpredictable manager who is constantly standing over your shoulder, clipboard in hand, waiting to write you up for the slightest flaw. You begin to notice that you hold your breath throughout the day without meaning to. Your shoulders stay elevated toward your ears, bracing for a hit that isn't coming. You keep yourself perpetually busy, packing your schedule from morning until night, because deep down, you know that if you stop, you will have to feel the overwhelming weight of everything you've been pushing down. You are constantly living in a state of high alert, treating your own heart like a fragile, unstable element that could shatter at any second. Living this way is quiet, but it is deeply exhausting. It wears down your spirit in ways that are hard to explain to people on the outside. You might look completely calm and composed to everyone around you, but inside, you are running an endless marathon just to stay ahead of your own self-criticism. You are endlessly working to earn a sense of peace that should have been your birthright all along. Recognizing these habits within yourself is not an invitation to feel ashamed or to judge yourself for having them. You did not choose to build these patterns out of spite. You built them as a shield. At some point, being hyper-vigilant felt safer than being vulnerable. But recognizing the absence of safety is the very first step toward building something new. It is simply about opening the door, taking a quiet look inside, and acknowledging that the way you treat yourself in those small, mundane moments sets the entire climate for your emotional existence. You are allowed to stop being your own harsh observer. You are allowed to start offering yourself the exact same gentle patience you so freely give to everyone else. Where did we learn to treat ourselves with such relentless, unforgiving scrutiny? When did our internal voice stop being a source of comfort and start feeling like an unyielding critic watching our every move? We were not born carrying this heavy weight of self-judgment. As children, we didn't double-check every feeling or censor every burst of emotion. The architecture of self-judgment was built brick by brick, over time, often out of a profound need for self-preservation. Often, it begins as an old survival mechanism. At some vulnerable point in your past, being intensely self-critical felt like a clever strategy to protect yourself from getting hurt. You unconsciously realized that if you criticized yourself first, no one else's judgment could ever catch you completely by surprise. If you pointed out your own flaws before anyone else had the chance to, you could soften the sting of external rejection. If you held yourself to impossible, perfectionistic standards, you believed you could shield yourself from disapproval, disappointment, or abandonment. You learned to manage your outer environment by tightly controlling yourself down to the smallest detail. What began as a temporary shield, however, slowly hardened into a permanent cage. The protective defense system that was originally designed to keep you safe from external judgment ended up internalizing the exact harshness you were trying to escape. Without realizing it, you became both the prisoner and the guard inside your own mind. The voice that was supposed to keep you safe became the very voice keeping you terrified. Notice how this structure operates in your day-to-day life. The moment an uncomfortable or messy human emotion arises, like a quiet wave of sadness on a random afternoon, or a sudden spike of anxiety before stepping into a room full of people, the architecture of self-judgment immediately activates. Instead of simply allowing yourself to feel what you are feeling, you instantly judge the feeling itself. You tell yourself you shouldn't be feeling this way, that you should be stronger, more composed, or further along in your healing journey. You add a secondary layer of self-blame on top of your original pain. Pause for a moment and look at this pattern with soft, curious eyes. When you react to your own vulnerability with immediate harshness, ask yourself gently, who taught you that your feelings were unacceptable? Where did you absorb the idea that you are only worthy of care and respect when you are calm, successful, and completely balanced? The way we speak to ourselves during our quietest moments of weakness reveals whether our internal environment is built on unconditional support or strict, conditional approval. When your inner world is built on conditional approval, you are constantly walking a tightrope, knowing that a single mistake will cost you your own internal peace. But you do not have to live inside a fortress of your own creation. You can choose to dismantle this architecture piece by piece, replacing the harsh walls of judgment with the open, welcoming space of self-compassion. When we begin looking at the parts of ourselves we have spent a lifetime trying to ignore, our sudden envy, our quiet impatience, our deepest insecurities, our profound fatigue, it can feel deeply uncomfortable. We live in a world that constantly rewards us for presenting a polished, seamless exterior, so we learn to hide those messy human traits away. We lock them down in the dark corners of our minds, pretending they don't exist because we fear what they might say about our character if anyone ever saw them. But trying to exile parts of your own lived experience never actually erases them. It only creates a deep, exhausting internal conflict that drains your spirit. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carl Jung. This profound insight reminds us that genuine emotional grounding and peace never come from pretending everything is perfectly fine, or forcing a superficial positive attitude over genuine pain. True healing comes from having the courage to gently acknowledge the parts of your experience that feel difficult, messy, or inconvenient. Making the unacknowledged parts of yourself conscious simply means bringing curious, tender attention to the exact feelings you usually try to push away. It means refusing to turn your back on yourself when you are at your least attractive. When you feel a sudden surge of jealousy over a friend's accomplishment, or a sharp wave of irritation over a minor delay in your schedule, emotional safety means choosing not to panic. It means taking a breath and saying, I see this feeling. I don't have to act on it, and it doesn't make me a pure or broken person. It is just an emotion asking to be noticed, acknowledged, and understood. When you treat your shadow, those tender, unhealed, or uncomfortable parts of yourself, with fear, you give it power over your life. You spend your days walking on eggshells inside your own head, terrified that the wrong situation will expose your flaws. But when you stop running from your own humanity, the fear begins to dissolve. You realize that your shadows are not monsters waiting to destroy you. They are simply old hurts, unmet needs, and protective defenses that never learned how to relax. Meeting your shadow without fear means offering yourself a quiet space of unconditional hospitality. It means sitting with your grief without telling yourself to cheer up. It means honoring your exhaustion without berating yourself for lack of productivity. It means accepting that you are a complex, feeling human being who is allowed to have difficult days. When you extend this level of soft, grounded acceptance to your darkest thoughts, you build a foundation of self-trust that nothing on the outside can shake. You become a safe harbor for your own heart, proving to yourself that no matter what rises to the surface, you will not abandon you. Becoming safe within yourself requires a conscious, daily decision to soften your internal posture. Most of us are conditioned to brace against life. We tighten our muscles, hold our breath, and prepare for the worst whenever an uncertain situation arises. You might notice this while waiting in line at the grocery store, sitting in traffic, or waiting for a reply to an important text message. Your body responds as if there is an active threat, even when you are simply standing in a quiet room. We carry this physical bracing into our emotional lives, holding ourselves so tightly that the slightest shift in circumstances feels like an existential threat. Softening is an active discipline. It is not a passive surrender or giving up. It is an intentional choice to drop the unnecessary weight we carry. It means intentionally unclenching your jaw when you realize you're biting down hard. It means taking a slow exhale and allowing your chest to drop, letting your belly soften and your shoulders drift away from your ears. When an uncomfortable thought crosses your mind, like a sudden worry about your career path or a memory of a past failure, instead of tightening your grip and trying to solve it immediately, practice softening around the sensation. We spent so many years believing that tightness equals control and that control equals safety. We thought if we could just keep every muscle tense and every scenario mapped out, nothing could ever hurt us again. But living in a constant state of bracing doesn't keep the world out. It only keeps peace from coming in. It leaves us exhausted, frayed, and constantly running on emotional adrenaline. When you practice softening, you begin to teach your nervous system that you are safe in this present moment. You give yourself permission to lower the heavy shield you've been carrying for years. Allow the feeling to exist without immediately trying to fix, defend, or analyze it. Notice where the tension hides in your body when you feel overwhelmed. Is it a knot in your stomach? A tightness in your throat? A heavy burden across your upper back? Instead of fighting that physical sensation or trying to force it to disappear, send a quiet breath directly to that space. Tell that part of your body that it is okay to rest now. You don't have to carry the entire world on your back while standing in your own kitchen. Softening means offering yourself a gentle touch instead of a harsh impulse. It means choosing a slower pace when your mind wants to rush into panic. When you make a mistake or drop the ball on something, softening is the quiet pause before your old self-judgment can kick in. It is the moment where you say, "This is hard, but I can meet myself with kindness right now." Safety grows in the space where you stop treating your internal state like an emergency that needs instant correction. Every time you choose to unclench, every time you choose to release the posture of defense, you build a deeper level of self-trust. You prove to yourself that your peace is not dependent on perfection, but on your willingness to be gentle with your own heart. Softening is the bridge that brings you out of survival mode and carries you back home to a place where you can truly, deeply rest. A profound sign of emotional insecurity within oneself is living entirely on reflex. When we don't feel safe inside, life becomes a series of automatic reactions rather than conscious choices. An event occurs in our outer environment, and before we even have time to process what is happening, we immediately react with our oldest, most practiced response. We retreat into our old shell, put up our usual defenses, or lash out in self-protection. We live our days operating on worn-out emotional tracks, repeating the same heavy cycles over and over again, and then wonder why we feel so trapped and exhausted. It looks like a friend suddenly rescheduling a dinner plan you were looking forward to, and your mind instantly jumps to the worst possible conclusion: that they are pulling away from you, that they don't truly care, or that you are a burden to them. It looks like a personal project taking longer than expected, and you immediately decide that you lack skill, discipline, or intelligence. A simple moment occurs, and within seconds, your mind has built an entire painful narrative out of thin air. You become completely swept away by automatic stories that have very little to do with the actual reality of the present moment. These automatic reactions feel so fast and convincing because they are deeply carved grooves in our minds. They were formed during times in our past when we genuinely felt unsafe, powerless, or unremembered. Back then, assuming the worst or bracing for rejection was a way to protect our hearts from being caught off guard. But when we bring those ancient survival patterns into our current lives, we end up reliving our old pain in completely safe situations. We react to the present as if it were the past, trapping ourselves in a world where nothing ever truly changes. Building true internal safety means learning how to insert a quiet, gentle pause between the spark and the flame. It means creating a tiny sanctuary of time between the thing that happens to you and your reaction to it. When something triggers an old, familiar feeling of inadequacy, fear, or anxiety, you learn to step back instead of leaning into the panic. You pause. You ground your feet on the floor, feel the breath moving in your chest, and observe the automatic narrative forming in your head from a distance. In that quiet pause, you gain a powerful revelation. You realize that your initial thought is just a habit, not an absolute truth. It is just an old, emotional ghost passing through the room, trying to protect you using a map from a life you aren't living anymore. You do not have to believe every thought your mind generates when it is afraid. You do not have to follow your panic down the exact same dark road it always wants to take you. In that small, sacred gap of awareness, you regain your power to choose how you respond. You step out of the passenger seat of your own life and take the wheel. You can look at that rising wave of fear and tell yourself with soft authority, "My mind is trying to protect me using an old story, but right now, in this exact moment, I am safe. I am an adult now. I have options I didn't have before, and I can choose a calmer, gentler path. Reclaiming choice in the present is how you break free from the emotional loops of your past. It is how you teach your heart that yesterday does not get to decide who you are today. Every single time you choose a deep breath over an immediate panic, every time you choose curiosity over assumption, and every time you choose patience over an old defense mechanism, you rewrite your internal landscape. You prove to yourself that you are no longer at the mercy of your triggers. You are the peaceful space in which those triggers can finally heal, quiet down, and dissolve. We often carry this quiet, heavy belief that to be truly healthy, grounded, or emotionally mature, we must feel confident, calm, and completely composed all of the time. We set this invisible standard for ourselves, where any sign of inner chaos is treated as a personal failure. The moment we inevitably experience a wave of self-doubt, a sudden lingering confusion, or a brief visit from old weaknesses, we jump to the saddest conclusion. We decide that we have regressed, that all our hard work was for nothing, or that we have failed in our personal growth. But human experience is never a clean, straight line. It is naturally complex, layered, and deeply contradictory. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Becoming who you truly are does not mean reaching an artificial state of flawless perfection, where nothing ever shakes you, hurts you, or bothers you again. It doesn't mean transforming into a polished marble statue that feels no pain. True wholeness means expanding your internal capacity to hold your own inner contradictions with grace. It means accepting that two completely opposite feelings can live inside your heart at the exact same time without canceling each other out. You can be deeply resilient, strong, and capable, and still feel profoundly tired at the end of a long week. You can be genuinely excited about stepping into a fresh, beautiful new phase of your life, while simultaneously holding a quiet nostalgia or anxiety for the familiar comfort of what you left behind. You can be immensely proud of how far you've come on your path of healing, and still have quiet days where you struggle to get through the most basic, simple tasks. None of these contradictions mean you are broken, hypocritical, or fake. They simply mean you are a whole, living human being with a heart large enough to contain the full spectrum of life. When we lack emotional safety inside, we constantly fight against our own complexity. We try to force our feelings into neat, tidy little boxes. We tell ourselves we aren't allowed to feel sad because we have so much to be grateful for. We tell ourselves we aren't allowed to feel scared because we promised ourselves we would be brave. We waste an incredible amount of energy trying to edit our internal world to make it look neat, uniform, and entirely predictable to ourselves and others. But perfection is a cold, sterile environment where true self-trust cannot grow. Emotional safety begins the moment you stop demanding that your inner climate be simple. It grows when you lower your weapons and give yourself unconditional permission to exist as a whole, complex person. It is looking at your messy, conflicting emotions and saying, I can be brave and terrified right now. I can be grieving what was while still welcoming what is coming. I am allowed to contain all of it. That soft, unconditional allowance is the real foundation of inner peace. When you give up the exhausting job of constantly curating yourself, you finally find out what it means to rest in your own truth. Pay close attention to the sound of your internal voice when no one else is around to hear it. What tone does it take when you miss an important deadline, drop a glass plate across the floor, or realize you forgot to complete a simple task? For so many of us, that inner voice is sharper, colder, and far more ruthless than anything we would ever dare say to a friend, a coworker, or even a complete stranger on the street. We speak to ourselves with a level of harshness that would appall us if we heard it spoken aloud to someone we love. We have become so accustomed to this harsh tone that we barely even notice it anymore. It operates like background noise, constantly whispering that we should have known better, that we are always falling behind, or that our best is simply not enough. We grew up believing that if we were tough on ourselves, we would stay disciplined, motivated, and safe from failure. We thought self-criticism was the only engine that could drive us forward. But endless self-criticism doesn't build strength or resilience. It slowly drains your vitality, destroys your self-belief, and leaves you feeling constantly unsafe in your own skin. To cultivate true inner safety, you must make a conscious, daily commitment to retrain that inner voice. This is not about repeating empty, forced compliments or pretending that mistakes don't matter. It is about adopting a grounded, practical, and deeply respectful way of speaking to yourself through every moment of your life. It is about learning to become a steady, supportive presence for your own heart when things go wrong, rather than being the first person to turn against yourself. Notice how a simple shift in language completely alters your internal environment. When you make a mistake or drop the ball, instead of automatically asking, "Why do I always mess things up?" practice shifting to a softer, more constructive phrase. "That didn't go the way I wanted, but I am learning, and I can handle the cleanup step by step." When you feel overwhelmed by a long list of responsibilities and pressing demands, instead of telling yourself, "I can't cope with this, it's too much," try pausing and saying, "This is a heavy, stressful moment, but I don't have to solve everything today. I only need to focus on the single next action." The tone you choose during times of stress determines whether your mind feels like a safe, supportive workspace or a hostile, terrifying environment. Every single sentence you speak to yourself either builds trust or breaks it. Every time you replace a sharp insult with a moment of patience, you signal to your nervous system that it is safe to relax. You begin to realize that you don't need a harsh inner critic to grow. You need a gentle, unwavering advocate who stands by you, especially when you fall. By choosing words of understanding over judgment, you build a refuge inside your own mind, a space where your spirit can finally breathe, heal, and truly feel at home. We often discuss boundaries in the context of our interactions with other people. Learning to say no to unreasonable demands on our time, energy, or attention. We practice setting limits with friends, family, and co-workers so that we don't burn out or feel taken for granted. But internal boundaries, the limits we set with our own minds, are just as crucial for creating emotional safety. An internal boundary is the gentle, decisive ability to say no to your own harmful habit loops, endless worrying spirals, and destructive rumination. Without internal boundaries, our minds become open battlegrounds where every passing anxiety, old regret, or worst-case scenario can completely hijack our peace. We allow a single, uncomfortable thought to drag us down a dark hallway of overthinking, wasting hours analyzing things we cannot change. We treat every random impulse of fear as an urgent emergency that requires our immediate, undivided attention. Living without inner limits means constantly leaving the doors to your heart wide open, letting any passing doubt come in and wreck the house. An internal boundary looks like noticing that it is late at night and deciding that a difficult interaction from 3 years ago does not need to be analyzed at midnight. It looks like recognizing when your mind is beginning to spin out over the unknown future and softly telling yourself, I acknowledge that I feel anxious about what is coming, but constantly imagining worst-case scenarios right now will not prepare me. It will only exhaust me. I am setting this thought aside until tomorrow. It is stepping in as the grounded, compassionate parent of your own inner world and saying, we are not going down that painful road today. Setting boundaries with your own thoughts isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending that problems don't exist. It is about protecting your precious energy and honoring your fundamental need for rest. It is understanding that you do not owe every anxious thought an audience. Just because a worry pops into your mind does not mean you are required to pull up a chair and entertain it for hours. You are allowed to acknowledge a feeling, offer it a brief moment of quiet validation, and then gently close the door so you can return to the present moment. When you build strong internal boundaries, you create a sacred buffer between who you are and what you think. You step up as a firm, responsible adult for your own inner life, proving to yourself that your mind is a safe place to inhabit. You stop letting old fears run the show, and you begin protecting your peace with the same devotion you show to the people you love most. Becoming emotionally safe within yourself is not a single, distant destination where you arrive once and stay forever without effort. It is not a magical state of perfection where you never feel anxious again. Never doubt your worth, or never catch yourself slipping back into old patterns of self-criticism. Healing is not the complete absence of noise. It is the quiet, steady practice of returning. It is the gentle willingness to gather your scattered parts and bring them back to a safe harbor, time and time again. You will have days where you stumble. You will have moments where a sudden trigger catches you off guard, where an old insecurity rises up and takes over, or where you react to your own feelings with cold impatience. You might spend an entire afternoon trapped in overthinking, or catch yourself holding your breath and bracing against the day. When those moments happen, the old voice of judgment will try to tell you that you have lost all your progress, that your healing was an illusion, and that you are right back where you started. But that harsh verdict is a lie. The true measure of your growth and inner safety is not whether you ever fall off balance. It is how gently, patiently, and swiftly you bring yourself back home when you do. The moment you realize you have stepped into an old, painful pattern is not a sign of failure. It is a moment of profound awareness. That realization is the exact doorway through which you can practice self-compassion. Instead of using your slip-up as a stick to beat yourself with, let it be a quiet invitation to soften. Catching yourself being hard on yourself isn't a reason for punishment. It is a signal that a tender part of you is calling out for reassurance. When you feel yourself drifting away into panic, self-doubt, or harsh judgment, pause right where you are. Take a slow, intentional breath. Unclench your jaw. Release your shoulders down away from your ears, and feel the solid weight of your feet resting on the floor. Bring a hand to your chest, or wrap your arms around yourself if it helps you feel present. Offer yourself the quiet, comforting words you've been longing to hear from the outside world. I am right here with you. It is okay that today was hard. I am not leaving you, and we are going to figure this out together. Remind yourself that you do not need to earn the right to feel safe, respected, and sheltered inside your own mind. You do not have to prove your worth through constant productivity, flawless performance, or pleasing everyone around you before you are allowed to rest. Inner safety is built brick by brick, moment by quiet moment. Every single time you choose understanding over judgment, patience over frustration, and soft acceptance over cold criticism. Every time you choose to forgive yourself for a mistake. Every time you choose to listen to your body's fatigue instead of pushing through it. And every time you offer yourself a gentle thought in the middle of a hard moment, you lay another stone in the sanctuary of your mind. You are gradually creating an internal world so warm, grounded, and steady that no external storm can ever truly dismantle it. You are building a lifelong home inside yourself, a space where you can finally take off your armor, drop your heavy burdens, and truly, deeply rest. If you have stayed with this reflection all the way to this moment, take a quiet second right now just to pause and acknowledge yourself. You didn't just listen to a series of ideas. You allowed your heart to sit with some of the most tender, vulnerable parts of what it means to be a human being navigating an inner life. In a world that constantly demands that we move faster, perform better, and hide our flaws, choosing to slow down and look inward is a profound act of self-preservation and quiet courage. Throughout this journey, we have explored how easy it is to treat our own minds as hostile territory. We reflected on the silent, invisible tension we carry in our bodies when we walk on eggshells around our own thoughts. The restless feeling that if we stop moving, our doubts and unfinished emotional business will catch up with us. We looked closely at what it means to lack safety inside, recognizing how it subtly shows up in second-guessing our words after a simple conversation, reaching compulsively for distractions during quiet pauses, or treating every minor mistake as a heavy verdict on our worth. We unraveled the deep architecture of self-judgment, remembering that our harsh inner critic was never an innate part of who we are, but a survival strategy built in the past to protect ourselves from external pain. We learned that true peace doesn't come from forcing a bright, artificial positivity, but from meeting our shadow, our envy, fatigue, and insecurities without fear or rejection. Or we explored Carl Jung's reminder that we become whole not by imagining figures of light, but by making our inner darkness conscious with curiosity and care. We practiced the active discipline of softening, unclenching our jaws, dropping our shoulders, and letting go of the exhausting posture of bracing against life. We discovered how to insert a gentle pause between the spark of a trigger and the flame of our old automatic reflexes, reclaiming our power to choose a calmer path in the present moment. We honored the truth that we are allowed to hold contradictory feelings at once, to be resilient and exhausted, excited and nostalgic, proud and still struggling. We looked at how to retrain our inner dialogue so that our mind becomes a supportive workspace rather than a hostile environment. And we discovered the necessity of internal boundaries to stop our thoughts from dragging us down endless, dark hallways of overthinking. Now, as we bring this reflection to a close, it is essential to remember that becoming emotionally safe within yourself is not a single, far-away destination where you arrive once and stay effortlessly forever. You will still have days where you stumble. There will be mornings where you wake up with a lingering weight in your chest, or moments where an old trigger catches you off guard and sends you spiraling back into self-criticism. When those days come, and they will, it does not mean you have failed. It does not mean you have lost your progress or that your healing was an illusion. The true test of inner safety is never whether you remain perfectly balanced at all times. It is how gently, patiently, and swiftly you bring yourself back home when you fall off track. Every time you catch yourself being hard on yourself and choose to soften. Instead, you are building that safety. Every time you drop your heavy burdens, take a deep, unfiltered breath and offer yourself the same grace you so freely extend to others. you lay another stone in the sanctuary of your mind. You are proving to your nervous system that you no longer need to run away from yourself. You are showing your heart that you are a reliable, steady companion who will not abandon you when things get difficult or messy. You don't need to earn the right to feel safe, respected, and sheltered inside your own skin. You don't have to prove your worth through relentless productivity or flawless perfection before you are allowed to rest. Your worth was already whole long before you learned to doubt it. And it remains whole today. As you step back into the flow of your day, whether you are returning to your work, stepping into your quiet home, or simply resting where you are, take this sense of grounded stillness with you. Let it remind you that no matter what storms arise in the outside world, you have the power to create a quiet, peaceful sanctuary within your own heart. Before you go, take one final, slow, deep breath. Fill your lungs completely. Hold it for a brief moment and release it with a long, gentle exhale. Drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and let your body feel anchored to the earth beneath you. Let's lock in this shift together. Take a moment to leave a quiet statement in the comments below to honor your commitment to your own inner peace. I am choosing to be a safe, loving home for myself. Write it down as a promise to your heart, and let it serve as a reminder that whenever life feels overwhelming, you can always choose to return home to yourself. Thank you for sharing this space and time today. Be gentle with yourself. Take it step by step. And remember that you are building a lifelong refuge within, a space where you can finally take off your armor and truly, deeply rest.